No organization, I think, is ever going to do security perfectly. It's a matter of doing it better than most, not being an easy target, not making life easy for the bad guys. If you can do that, the bad guys are more likely to go against an easy target because there's enough out there. If you can be a slightly harder target, one, the bad guys are more likely to go elsewhere. Two, if you're making life difficult for the bad guys, you're making their attacks noisy, and you're going to be in a better situation to detect the attacks. Once you've detected it, you can then remediate it. In the same way, I doubt whether you do your own books or your own auditing or your own contracts. It's like everything, or your own plumbing. You get someone else to do it. You know what you need to ask them and the questions that you need to ask, and you know how to identify someone who's reputable, and you've got the right protections in place, but you're probably best off not doing it yourself. And I'd say the same thing with looking after data.
I recently had the opportunity to visit the Cisco offices in London, saw some fantastic equipment such as 400 gig Ethernet and some really old stuff such as the Cisco AGS routers from many, many years ago. But I specifically went to London to interview people such as Martin Lee. Martin is the author of this book, Cyber Threat Intelligence, has many, many years of experience, works for Cisco Talos. I last spoke to him in February of this year at Cisco Live, where I asked him about the biggest threats facing us in 2023. Now, as 2023 draws to a close, I'll ask him questions about what are the biggest threats facing us in 2024. What do you need to be aware of? And it's really interesting to see the changes and also the things that have stayed the same. Martin not only tells us what the threat landscape looks like and threats that you need to be aware of, but also tells us how we can protect ourselves from those threats. I last spoke to Martin in Amsterdam, right?
That's right.
Earlier this year.
Yeah.
But Martin, since that time, well, firstly, welcome. And since that time, you got some good news about the book.
Yeah, it's finally published. So
Congrats.
I'm now an author, which is awesome. It's the book I wanted to read when I started out in the domain, which is 20 odd years ago now.
What's the name of the book?
So the name of the book is Cyber Threat Intelligence by Martin Lee, published by Wiley. So it's available anywhere you can buy books, including online. When I started out in the domain, it took me a few years to work out what we were doing was actually called Cyber Threat Intelligence. Yep. And I set out to find the textbook to teach me about it, and I couldn't find it. Years later, there are a number of books out there, but there's not that one that I wanted to find that talks about the theory of how you do it. So I thought, well, no one else is going to write it. So I set out to write it myself. And ultimately, my goal was to have everything that you'd need to know to follow a career in threat intelligence. So it's not about click here, go to this website, click here, click there, download this software, type this on the command line. It really is, it's the theory of everything you need to know about threat intelligence, cyber threat intelligence specifically, and what you need to know if you're going to follow a career.
Is it for someone starting out or someone who's more advanced?
It's in the back of my mind. I was writing for someone at university, either studying this as part of a postgraduate course or an advanced undergraduate course. The idea is you have some notion of what cybersecurity is, but if you're following that specialism or you're interested in it, it's what you need to know to start out. Or if you're a practitioner, it's a reference, and you might find something in it that you don't already know.
I'll put a link to it below. So go and support Martin. He spent, 3 years writing it?
It was 2 years of my life. It was a long time, but I'm delighted to have done it. The publisher's delighted. It's sold, half a dozen copies. Not only my mum has bought it, so I'm very, very happy.
Congrats for that, man. Now, on that note, we spoke was it February, right, about attacks against organizations. And I mean, kind of in line with what your book's about. And Talos have released this half year in review.
Yes.
And one of the things that was really interesting in this is Mercenary software, or Mayhem it's called. Yeah. And they mentioned Predator, spyware, and there's some others that are sort of well known, which we won't necessarily mention by name, but I can. But like Pegasus is one that people probably know the most about. Yes. But I mean, Predator seems to be a new one, and it seems to be growing, right? So perhaps you can tell us about why it made it to the report and what's going on.
So it's all really part of the threat landscape and how the threat landscape is evolving. If you think about this from a state actor's point of view, like so many things, it's difficult and expensive for states to set up very, very detailed technical departments that are doing stuff which is really quite difficult. So if you were a nation state and you were setting up your offensive cyber operations, it's tough, it's difficult, it takes a lot of time. So they look to outsource these operations to the private sector. So this is what we're seeing with this, with these information stealing attacks. It's nation states contracting third-party private sector organizations to act as mercenaries, effectively, being paid by a nation state to carry out offensive activity on behalf of a nation state. And what these organizations specialize in is compromising like everyday people.
Yeah.
So journalists, politicians, people who may well be considered dissidents, but people who have been placed under surveillance by a nation state to infringe on their human rights, steal their personal data. I imagine from the nation state's point of view, it's about understanding what it is that they're doing, who they're talking to. But, let's recognize this, what it is. It's illegal surveillance. It's hacking those personal devices. And so much of our entire personal life now is on our phone, that really we think it's unacceptable that nation states and private enterprises are facilitating this form of surveillance, stealing personal data. If you're a criminal and you get a court order for surveillance, that's one thing. If you're a normal everyday person going about your legitimate business and you get put under surveillance, I think that's something else. So we're seeing a growth in this kind of activity.
I was going to ask you, is this like a big growth in it?
It's been happening for a few years, but it continues to happen. We do see more of it. I think, like many things, there are more and more organizations that are specializing in this and developing that capability, and people need to be aware of it. And also, we need to get consensus in the international community to say, do you know what, this is unacceptable and it needs to be properly regulated and outlawed.
The problem with this stuff, right, is you get an SMS, you open that up, so you get like a one-click infection or installation.
Or not even.
Or zero-click with some of the software.
It's like with every device, anything that's got software, it's running software, there's going to be vulnerabilities there somewhere. What these spyware organizations specializing in is finding those vulnerabilities so that they can compromise these devices and get their spyware into it. So make sure you're keeping your devices fully patched, up to date. Be aware that if you are at risk, you might want to have a separate device that you use for your professional life, and keep that separate from your personal phone, or even better, let's just outlaw it and stop it happening.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, so what can you do really? I mean, there's these stories where citizen labs, right, found, or some people gave them samples from their phones, and they found Pegasus and they found Predator, the two that the Predators mentioned in this report. So I'm assuming that's similar. I mean, you don't have to get into specifics, but I'm assuming that's similar to the idea with Pegasus, right? It takes over your phone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, think about it from a threat actor's point of view. It's a way of getting into a device, either with the interaction of a user, so you've got that one-click thing when you're clicking on the link, or potentially without user interaction, so you're just getting on the device. Once you're there, you'll want to persist in some way, and then it's a matter of just exfiltrating the information that you see on it that you can then monitor and put to your own evil purposes. Fundamentally, it's no different from a laptop or any other system. There's going to be vulnerabilities there. Keep it patched.
I was going to ask you, what do you do, right?
Keep it patched is the number one thing that you can do. Keep it patched. As I said, also think about having separate devices for separate parts of your life, so that one is separate from the other. You can run antivirus on your mobile devices. It's not always going to be 100% successful, but at least it gives you a better opportunity for detecting these types of things. But yeah, number one, as with anything, keep it fully patched.
Just your opinion, and I mean, Maybe just give us the stats. Android, iOS, both at risk, right?
Yeah, they're both at risk. If you look at and I'm sure you know this better than me, the market for zero-day vulnerabilities, the size of the bounties that you can get for the different operating systems probably gives you an idea of how rare it is. Obviously, because there's a lot of money involved, there are a lot of researchers out there, either freelance vulnerability researchers or individuals working directly for these organizations who are able to put a lot of resources into analyzing these systems to find the vulnerabilities that can be exploited in order to install the spyware on it. Writing software is tough.
You used to do a lot of that, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely. And I look back now at some of the software that I wrote, and yeah, of course it was full of holes. And I look at it now and I sort of cry. But that's the same with anyone, with anyone's development over their career as a software engineer. Of course, when you start out, you're going to make mistakes. This is why you have senior engineers supervising. This is why we have code inspection, things like this. But even with all of this, it is so difficult writing software, and modern devices are so complex. You're going to have to expect that there's vulnerabilities in there. What we really want is we want the white hat hackers and the legitimate security community, if I can use that word, finding these vulnerabilities first and fixing the vulnerabilities, getting the patches out before the black hats and the bad guys are finding it and putting it to their own use. And then even if they do put that to their own use, again, it's for the security community. Let's spot the exploitation of the vulnerabilities early and as soon as we can. So again, we can work on a fix and we can resolve the problem.
So just for anyone who's interested in seeing a write-up, Talos have got this half-year in review document, which I'll link below, but they've also got like a detailed write-up of the Predator software. And Jack from Darknet Diaries did a really cool podcast on it as well, so I'll link those below. Big question. This is the issue a lot of people encounter, right? They're not technical like we are. They're not in the cybersecurity niche, perhaps. So what do businesses do to protect their data?
Again, we can go back. Number one thing, patch again.
It's a mantra, right?
Yeah. Secondly, if you can have your data in a secured environment. So one of the best things you can do, certainly for most organizations, hold your data in the cloud. Actually have it hosted by a third party that's doing the security operations themselves, that has a SOC that's monitoring those systems, and protect the login to those systems with two-factor authentication. If you can do those two things, you're going to be in a pretty good position. The next step is making sure that you've got some form of endpoint protection on every device that you use. Endpoint protection, two-factor authentication to access your data, which is held in the cloud, plus making sure that you've got a good patching process in place. That already puts you in a very, very good position. Beyond that, we need to start thinking about what is it that you've got to lose. Obviously, if you're a big business or you're in a regulated environment, such as you're dealing with medical data or financial data, then we need to think about the consequences of what could possibly go wrong, because it's going to be something which is worse. If you're your own small business, if you can do those three things and do it well and do it consistently, you're going to be in a very, very good place. The other one that you want to do, of course, is backup. Yeah. We've been talking about backups, since I was a kid, even before that, 50, 60 years ago, people have been talking about the importance of backing up systems. It's the Achilles heel for ransomware. Still, we're not very good at backing up. But again, this is why we've got a cloud system, and then you're outsourcing that backup into someone else. But if you can do it yourself, again, you're going to be in a good place.
So did I hear you right by saying that it's better to put stuff in the cloud than it locally?
For most organizations, you've got to think, so everything in security is a trade-off. The euphemism is if you can replace cloud computing with somebody else's computer, it's a very good way of thinking about it. But if you can think of, for most businesses, am I better off protecting and looking after my own data, or actually is a third party that specializes in this likely to do it better than me? In most cases, the answer is probably yes. Not always, and if you can look after your own data to a high level and you've got the proper backups in place and you're doing those security operations tasks, brilliant. Go do it yourself. It's not for everyone. If it's everyday data, something which isn't specialized, which isn't protected, you want to focus on your day job and what it is that you do, you're probably better off having it in the cloud secured with two-factor authentication. But it's a personal decision. It's always a value judgment, and you've got to think of where is my time best suited, what's both most beneficial for me and for my clients. I'd say 9 times out of 10, outsource it to someone else. In the same way, I doubt whether you do your own books or your own auditing or your own contracts. It's like everything, or your own plumbing. You get someone else to do it. You know what you need to ask them and the questions that you need to ask. And you know how to identify someone who's reputable, and you've got the right protections in place. But you're probably better off, as the same situation like with plumbing, you're probably best off not doing it yourself. And I'd say the same thing with looking after data.
Martin, that gets me to something I read yesterday, the Cisco Cybersecurity Readiness Index, because you say companies need to put stuff in the cloud, they need to use 2FA, they need to patch backup. Yeah. But that's quite a worrying read.
Our Cybersecurity Readiness Index, I thought was absolutely fascinating. The results really resonated with me because I thought this was something that anecdotally I felt. The summary, there's a whole report, but the summary is there's about 15% of organizations that are, the terms they use, mature in their cybersecurity readiness. So basically, they're doing as much as you could expect them to do. And again, talking with organizations and working with them, you kind of get the feeling that there's about 15% of organizations that are doing cybersecurity well.
It's 1.5, right? Not 15.
1.5.
That's a worry.
15%. Well, it's better than 5% or 2%. So 15% you think, yeah, they're going to be fine. They're going to be absolutely fine. They're taking it seriously. They're having everything in place. We can have a peer relationship with them, exchange information. They will tell us stuff which is useful to us. We can tell them information and pass intelligence that they will know how to use. Everyone's good. Everyone's happy. We've then got another tranche, which brings us to about sort of 50% of the market of other organizations that are kind of doing okay. We've got 15% who are doing as much as you can expect. Then we've got a whole load that are kind of doing okay, and you think, okay, they're probably going to be okay. At least they're doing the right things, maybe not everything that they need to do, maybe not with the priority that you'd like them to do, but you think, yeah, they're probably going to be okay. Then we have a good 50% of the market, which ranges from sort of trying to do what they can through to utterly hopeless.
Put the head in the sand.
Your words rather than mine, but that's the sector of the market that gives me cause for concern. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure how we address this, or more interestingly, why. This is the bit that always resonates with me. Well, why do we have sort of 50% who are doing okay, 15% doing really well, and then we've got another 50% that aren't? You can't plead ignorance these days. We know about the attacks that are out there. We know about the threat actors. We know about the consequences of a successful attack.
See, I can say things you can't say, right?
So
there's no budget before an attack, but there's a huge budget after an attack. But sorry, I interrupted your flow.
Ultimately, or it's wishful thinking it's never going to happen to me. Personally, what I'd like to see is maybe a campaign like we saw anti-smoking through the 80s and 90s of pointing out, everyone's got the anecdote about their granddad who smoked 80 a day, was run over by a bus. There's a cybersecurity equivalent. Oh, we never had two-factor authentication. We never bothered with this. We never bothered with that. And we never got hit with ransomware until it does hit. Yeah. And then the consequences are devastating. Would genuinely rather organizations avoided these negative consequences because they can be absolutely devastating, and it's a waste. I don't know, it's an absolute waste. If you can just put a little bit of effort in early on, it pays dividends. It doesn't need to be particularly expensive. It doesn't need to be onerous. but you do need to be aware of the risk. You do need to be aware that cyber attacks happen to everyone. It could happen to you. Do the basics, get it right, and you're going to be okay.
What was interesting in this report, and we discussed it offline, it seems like sort of emerging or newer or agile, whatever term you want to use, medium, small businesses seem to actually be better positioned than large corporates, right?
Also developing economies as well, which I find fascinating. So I think it's organization and countries that aren't dealing with technical debt. They're doing things fresh. They're coming with modern ideas about systems architecture and network architecture, and developing things from ground zero and doing it right from the start, rather than so many people that are trying to cope with the legacy decisions that were made maybe 30 odd years ago when the world was a very different place, and trying to bolt on security onto that. It's difficult, it's expensive, there's always going to be gaps. So that's fascinating as well. And again, you've got to ask the question, well, how do we help people deal with technical debt and live with these legacy systems that may no longer be able to be patched, and securing those? It's not impossible, we can do it, but it does take that little bit more thought and that little bit more effort.
It's worrying though, because it seems like the attacks are just increasing. When we spoke earlier this year, you mentioned ransomware being like the big thing, and that seems to have changed as well. And you've mentioned ransomware a few times.
It's continuously evolving. This is what makes cybersecurity such a fascinating discipline. It keeps changing. So a couple of years ago, we saw the development of that double threat within ransomware. So the threat actors would get inside an organization, find the key systems, steal the data, and then hit it with ransomware, so encrypting the data. And then that threat is, if you don't pay the money, we won't decrypt your data or give you the decryption key, plus we'll publicly release the data, and you're dealing with a data breach. In fact, it's a completely false threat, because they've stolen the data. You've got a data breach anyway, and you have to, hold up my hands and deal with the situation as it is, rather than try and sweep it under the rug and pretending it's not happening. Over time, we've seen the development of that double threat into a single threat, which is the bad guys will just steal your data, not bother encrypting it, and threaten to release it. In some ways, I think this is possibly a positive. Hear me out. Encrypting data takes time. It's difficult. You need to have the ransomware in place. You need it to function completely to completion, to do its job. There's only so many ways that you can encrypt data. In the security community, I think we're getting better and better at detecting ransomware, detecting it through static analysis before it acts, and then detecting it as soon as it starts encrypting data. From the bad guys' point of view, the last thing that they want is for their ransomware to be detected before it's had a chance to encrypt the data, because then they can't claim on the ransom. My interpretation, or is one of the interpretations on this, is the bad guys are focusing on like a smash and grab. They're getting in, stealing the data as fast as they can, because it's quicker than ransoming, and then using that to get something from their victims, rather than taking a bit of a risk and taking the time to encrypt something. There are other interpretations of the situation, but I do think it's an issue of the threat actors, or certain areas of the threat actors, developing this smash and grab, getting in, getting something quickly, and looking for a very fast return on their investment, rather than expecting to be able to persist for a long time and take the time in order to encrypt data. It's a change, but it's a very, very interesting change in how things are moving on. And we will see more. We will see more evolutions.
It's interesting, because when we spoke earlier this year, the biggest thing on everyone's lips, it seemed, was ransomware. Now it's like ransomware plus this mercenary software. Are those the two big threats that you see at the moment?
There are many threats. It's constantly shifting, and it also depends on your own threat profile. Certainly, ransomware isn't going away. There's nothing on the horizon that I can see which is going to mean that ransomware is going to stop. I think it's always going to be with us. It's all driven by profit. Let's not forget the vast majority of attacks are criminal in nature. We've got dedicated criminals looking to make illicit profit, Ransomware is a criminal business model that they developed, which is very, very profitable. We see that dual threat of stealing data coming out of this, which is becoming bigger. So this summer was the first time that in our data and looking at our incident response data, we see more data theft than ransomware. So it is something which is getting bigger. This is the first time we've seen it overtake ransomware. Mercenaries, it's worrying. It's there. We also need to look at that in the context of state-sponsored attacks. With a backdrop of conflict in the Ukraine and conflict globally, we also see criminal groups with greater or lesser associations with the nation state conducting attacks against organizations, whether that's just defacement, whether it's just trying to destroy systems, disrupt systems, deploy wipers, just generally causing havoc. That's the other bit that really disturbs me and gives me cause for concern, and also the use of what we might consider non-traditional systems to hack into. I mean, we've talked about the risk for years of network devices, printers, routers, switches, firewalls. These are devices that are connected to the network. They have an operating system, they have spare CPU cycles, they can be used as a means of ingress by the bad guys. There's going to be vulnerabilities there, or there's going to be misconfigurations in one way or another. And so bad guys can use these as a point of ingress inside a network, enumerate the systems that are there, look for vulnerabilities, get inside them, and then cause some kind of additional attack, whether that's data theft or ransomware or just destruction or defacement. That happens an awful lot. And again, that's a shift that we've seen over the past through 3 years or so. But I think we're going to see more of that.
That's interesting because, I mean, IoT was the big alarm bell for a while. And now you look, it's network devices in addition to that.
Yeah, IoT, it's still an issue. It's anything that's connected to a network. Again, think of this from the bad guy's point of view. Behind every attack, you can almost feel the boss breathing down the attacker's neck. Everyone has a boss one way or another. The attackers are looking for ways to achieve their objectives, and they will always go for the easiest route because that provides the greatest return on investment for them. Think about those systems that maybe are unsecured or are slightly maybe flying under the radar, that maybe haven't been on your list of things to think about. The bad guys will attack them, but still, fundamentally, far too many organizations are not getting the basics right. Patching of your laptops, of your servers, of your basic systems, two-factor authentication, backup, patching, endpoint protection everywhere. If you can do that, you're already in a very, very good place. Get that right first before we start worrying about esoteric things that might be targets for more sophisticated hackers.
I'm glad you said that. I mean, you also, when I spoke to you last time, you also made a really good point, because you can feel sometimes that the sky is falling, that it's the end of the world with this stuff. But you said something along the lines that more attacks are stopped than actually take place.
Absolutely. It's still, it's a bad day when you get compromised, but it's a bad day not every day. So far more attacks are detected and blocked than succeed. No organization, I think, is ever going to do security perfectly. It's a matter of doing it better than most, not being an easy target, not making life easy for the bad guys. If you can do that, the bad guys are more likely to go against an easy target because there's enough out there. If you can be a slightly harder target, one, the bad guys are more likely to go elsewhere. Two, if you're making life difficult for the bad guys, you're making their attacks noisy, and you're going to be in a better situation to detect the attacks. Once you've detected it, you can then remediate it. So cyber attacks, they're not instantaneous. It's not something that just happens like that. They've got to find you first. They've got to conduct reconnaissance. They've got to find the vulnerability. They've got to exploit the vulnerability. They've got inside the system. Then that process is going to repeat. There's always, the fingerprints are always there if you look for them the more difficult you make it for the bad guys, the more fingerprints you're going to find on your networks, on your systems, the more chance that you have to detect it if you're looking. Once you've detected it, you're then in a position to kick the bad guys out.
It's interesting what you said, because I think you mentioned it before as well. You mustn't think that you're not going to be a target. Everyone could be a target.
Everyone's a target.
But you mustn't get paranoid that you're going to get this malicious software on your phone necessarily, unless you're a specific type of target.
Yeah, know what your threat profile is. Yeah. Most organizations, your risk are criminals. They're everywhere, they're going to be looking at everyone, and they know if they can get inside you, they can make money. Certain organizations and certain individuals have a higher threat profile, that they're attracting other attackers. If that's you, be aware of it, be aware what it is that you need to do. I think probably what I'd say, reach out to an expert organization to give you the protection that you need. For most organizations, it's about not being an easy target. It's about considering what is the worst that could happen and then planning for that. Also, if you work in a security industry, there is only so much you can do. It's very easy to get paranoid. It's very easy for this to become a 24/7 profession.
Yeah.
You do need to be able to take a step back. You do need to be able to recognize you can only do so much. You can never, ever be 100% secure. We need to be able to live with that uncertainty and say, okay, I've done everything that can be reasonably expected of me, and that's actually what it is that I need to do. And then also, it's so important, be able to step away and go and do something else. Hand the task on to someone else. Don't just do it on your own and think the entire organization's security depends on me. Okay, yeah, it probably does, but it's not only your responsibility. You do need to be able to switch off, go do something else, and you do need to recognize I can only do so much, but everything that I do during my day job, I move the security posture forwards. And if you can continuously move the security posture forwards every day, you're making the world a better place and you're making your organization safer. So if you can just patch one system in a day, you've made the world a better place. You're not going to be able to patch every single one, but just move that security posture forwards day by day. You're making progress, you're making the world a better place. At the end of the day, switch off, chill, go do something else, and then worry about it the next day.
Let's talk about opportunities, though, because for all this stuff that's happening, I interviewed Troy Hunt, Have I Been Pwned? And he's just getting these data breaches all the time.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Security is becoming like center of mind, if you like, for a lot of organizations. I went onto Cisco's website, and the very front page is a video talking about hackers. And there's a movie about a hacker breaking into an organization. So Cisco purchased Splunk. In the process, 28 billion, right? So what I see is if someone is new to Korea or someone's interested in this stuff, there's a lot of opportunities.
Oh, goodness, yes. It's all off the back of changes in technology. We are living in a new industrial revolution now. It's happening now. The changes that we saw during the Victorian period, and we can look back and the beginning of the 19th century through the end, we can say, oh my God, what enormous changes. We're living in the equivalent now in terms of digital technology. Everything is changing. We haven't stopped yet. Let's not forget just how new the internet is. It's still expanding. We're still able to do more and more and incredible things with technology. Technology is bringing so many advantages and changes to our lives. It's absolutely amazing. Cybersecurity is the negative side of that, as we're also having all of these positive changes. Unfortunately, the dark side of human nature is coming along with this. So we've got crime, we've got spying, we've got vandalism, we've got nation states, we've got geopolitical issues. All of that is coming along with it. It isn't going away. We still need people to come into cybersecurity. We need to think about the threats of these systems against these systems as it's changing and as it's happening. said before, the threat environment is not static. It keeps changing every day. We need to develop the new technologies that we're going to deploy to both secure systems, so they're resistant against attack, and also so that we're collecting telemetry and log data and analyzing that correctly so that we can detect when attack is in action, when it's actually happening. And then also we need to be able to enable the defenders to be able to respond to those attacks very, very swiftly and just kick the bad guys out. So there is still so much to do. I do like to think that this is a solvable problem. I do like to think that within my lifetime we can solve this problem. I like to think that we probably can. Certainly, I think we can hopefully solve the problem of software vulnerabilities through automated code inspection and to be able to spot the vulnerabilities in the source code before it's deployed. I think we can make a lot of progress in that. I doubt we're ever going to be able to solve the problem of users being users. How many years now we've been teaching people, don't click the link, don't click the link. What do? They click the link.
We all know what we're supposed to do, but we don't exercise like we're supposed to necessarily, stuff like that, right?
Human error is part of being human. Yeah. I don't think we can't blame the users too much. We also need to be aware of just how good the social engineering is. Yeah. Bad guys are very, very good at convincing people to do the wrong thing, in the same way that chocolate bar in your cupboard calls to you and convinces you to do the wrong thing. Cybersecurity is much the same. So we've got a whole area that I don't think we're ever going to solve, but we can manage, and we can manage better, and we can make life easier for the good guys and harder for the bad guys. And I think we do have areas where potentially we can solve it, but we need new people. We need people with new ideas, new approaches, fresh ideas, digital natives coming into the profession and looking at that. So it's still a very, very good career path and progression to get into.
I mean, there's so many unfilled positions in the UK and the US and around the world. It's just becoming more and more important. Companies don't survive if they get attacked. Yeah,
it's always been important. And I think now, because so much plays on digital technology now, the consequences of getting it wrong are just higher and higher. So we need to make sure that we're getting it right. We can't develop sort of an eggshell security, where as soon as one thing fails, it's all over, it's game over. We need to develop resilience. We need to accept we're never going to be 100% successful, but if this bit over here gets hacked, it's not a house of cards and everything falls down. We kind of live with that bit not quite working. We can isolate it, we can work on it, but we're going to keep everything else working. And to make resilient systems that can continue working even if one bit gets taken down or one bit gets compromised, it's not game over. Not all of the customer data is being leaked or something, but we need to develop that environment where that is happening.
Martin, you work for Talos. Talos is well known for certain products that are obviously commercial, but I think for a lot of people watching, they want to learn this stuff, and you've got a lot of open source tools. Absolutely. I was seeing as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, open source stuff has always been really important to us at Talos. Yeah, so on our website, we've got a whole section devoted to software that you can go and download, that you can play with. It's there to be used. There are also thriving communities, open source communities behind a lot of this software. There's many people think, obviously we're a commercial organization, we're part of Cisco. They're like, why on earth are you giving away stuff? It all comes down to our ethos. We're trying to make the world a better place, genuinely. We're trying to help. There are environments that are never ever going to buy Cisco. They don't have the budget, or they just don't have the capacity or capability to engage sort of corporate level protection. In which case, download our systems. Snort is one of the best well-known,
most famous one,
ones. This is open source IDS IPS system. Fundamentally, it's the same engine that powers our corporate solutions. Obviously, it's open source. There's no SLA, service level agreement. There's no bells and whistles. There's no fancy user front end, but it's the same engine. So it's there for people to download and use. We think if we can get protection in an environment that otherwise wouldn't have protection, then that's one less system that's going to get hacked and used to attack our customers. It also means that people can download these systems, they can play with it, they can follow the tutorials, they can follow the workthroughs. I'm sure you've got enough people in your communities that know Snort. Learn from them, develop your skills through downloading this stuff. Write your own network signatures, learn how you deploy it, see what's happening on a network, play with it so that you can skill yourself up. And then when you're entering the workforce, you're already skilled because you've been playing with the system and you know how to write these systems, you know how to deploy it. It'd be very easy to move on to the commercial systems or, for whatever vendor, because you've already learned those skills. We've got a whole world of other things. ClamAV for detecting malware. This is actually a component which is in our corporate solution. Again, you can learn about...
That's antivirus, right?
Yeah, antivirus. You can learn about detecting malware. You can write signatures, learn from other people. We've got tools for doing malware analysis. If you want to learn reverse engineering, many of our tools that our engineers and analysts use, we make open source. These are the ones that we use in-house, that we've developed in-house. So great, download it, play with it, learn from it, teach yourself, follow the tutorials. And we've also got other tools that our vulnerability discovery researchers use. So again, you can use the same tools we've developed in-house for identifying vulnerabilities. There's enough vulnerabilities out there to be discovered. If that's where you see your career, great, download the tools, expand your skill set, go look for these vulnerabilities and let's go find them and fix them before the bad guys find them. They're to be played with, thriving community to get involved with, learn, skill yourself up and together let's defeat those bad guys.
I love that. Because you can just download Snort and put it on like an open source firewall.
Absolutely.
And run it at home.
Yeah.
And make your network really secure.
Yeah, or just or learn from it. Learn to distinguish what's normal, what's abnormal. Write plugins for it. Use this as part of your own software development. I'm sure everyone's got ideas of how they're going to solve cybersecurity issues. Those systems are going to be built on existing third-party software and open source software. So great, go download it, play with it, enhance it, build it into your own solutions. Just make the world a better place. It's what we're trying to do.
I love that answer because there's people in certain parts of the world. I'm from South Africa originally. Not everyone can afford to buy this commercial solution from Cisco. But how do you learn? And it's fantastic, that Snort's available, these other options available for learning or for organizations that can't afford it.
Absolutely. There are many organizations that are out there where they don't have a security budget. Let's face it, it happens. And I think all of us in the security industry, would really love that you bought a proper maintained product. However, there are some organizations, some environments where that's never going to happen. And, great. Here's that third-party open source stuff. Download it. It's not going to get you as far as the fully working, all singing and dancing solution will, but it'll get you a lot of the way there. And if you can devote the time to it and also invest in the skills, both you're making these environments secure, but you're also developing those people so that they can enter the workforce and they can develop their skills.
I love it. The way I look at it is like Cisco Packet Tracer is another example. How are you going to learn to configure routers and switches if you don't have routers and switches? And Cisco give Packet Tracer away for free, so you can learn this stuff. So that when you go into the workforce, perhaps, or when you're changing jobs and you get into cybersecurity or networking, you already know what you're doing.
Absolutely. We've got the open source software.
Yep.
There are various tutorials, there are the communities that are out there. We've also got the Cisco Networking Academy where we've got various courses that you can take on networking and security. All of this is for free. The reason why we're trying to power an inclusive future, both for securing systems across the world, making possible these technological changes that are happening. People have got dreams of how technology is going to be used. Yeah, we want to enable that. That's very much what we want to do. But there's also a bit about there's so many untapped skills out there. There's people watching this video who want to learn about security, who want to learn about networking. there's so much stuff out there that we're trying to develop so that people can develop their skills. They can bring this to the workforce. They can make their dreams come true, whether that's by finding the employment of their dreams or they've got some kind of technology, some kind of system they want to build. We're trying to make that happen, and we're trying to make it easy for everyone.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the Skills for All website is great because, I looked there, I was surprised. Cisco have just for people who haven't seen this, have an ethical hacking course for free on Skills for All, as well as cybersecurity and networking, CCST. So free training. I mean, if you want to do the exam, you have to pay, but the training is for free.
The training is out there. The systems to download and play with are all free. You've got to pay for the exams. You've got to pay for my book as well, I'm afraid. All of this, it's so much out there. There's so much out there. It's all a matter of getting engaged and playing with it. It's like a massive playground. Go play with it, and you'll learn. You'll have fun, and we're making a better future.
We're in England. Mind the Gap has a special meaning in this country, and you kind of mentioned that on a blog article when you were talking about the Cisco Cybersecurity Readiness Index. Can you just briefly tell us why Mind the Gap?
Yeah, so for me, it was looking at, we've got this gap between organizations that are taking cybersecurity seriously, and at least to my mind, reacting appropriately for it and investing appropriately for it. And then we've got the gap with the rest of the economy, with the rest of organizations on a global level, where the threat is still out there, but there's a gap between the threat, the level of threat that they face, and the importance that they're taking it, and the amount of security and securing of systems that's being applied. And we need to narrow this gap, because if you fall in that hole where you get hit with an attack, where that threat becomes real to your organization and you're not equal to that threat or to that attack, you're going to fall in that gap, and you're going to fall in the hole, and it's not going to be a good day. And we want to stop this. So
Mind the Gap.
And this is also, it's not just an issue for individuals or an individual organization. This is something for society as a whole. How do we close that gap between the level of the threat and the level of protection? Part of it is going to be through awareness. However, I don't think there's any excuses for not being aware of cybersecurity threats now, but it's also going to be through upskilling people, allowing people to develop their skills, whether they see themselves as security professionals or young security professionals or something else, maybe software engineer or software administrator. You're still going to need to know something about security. We need to spread those skills, spread that awareness, so that we can close this gap and make life difficult for the bad guys.
So Martin, we in sort of the cybersecurity industry know about a lot of these problems, but some quick takeaways for people. What are, for instance, top 3 things or top 4 things that an organization should do, or that someone could recommend to the leadership of an organization?
Ultimately, it's about getting the basics right. If you can get the basics right, you're going to be in a very, very good position. So I think the first thing would, don't think about esoteric things. Don't think that you're necessarily going to be able to solve your problems by buying an expensive solution. 9 times out of 10, get the patching right. Patch, and patch again. If you can do that, you're already making yourself a much, much more secure organization. 2-factor authentication, it's really simple, it's really easy to do. If you can get that right, again, you're making yourself so much more secure, because if the bad guys even steal the username and password, they still can't use it without the user authorizing that 2-factor authentication. It's not a panacea, it's not 100%. Even if we tell the users don't authorize that 2-factor authentication, they will still do it, but it'll get you a long, long, long way there. Endpoint protection in some format everywhere. Every system has to have endpoint protection
like
on
AV
it.
or something?
Yeah, AV in some way, some sort of anti-malware system where which is being updated and maintained. It's no use having the update from last month or the signatures from last month. That was great against last month's attacks. You want to have the ones that are latest. So make sure that you've got a proper subscription, proper updating, and endpoint protection everywhere. And the last piece that I'd say is back up your data, either because that's in the cloud and someone else is backing it up for you. So if it gets deleted, you can roll back, there's something there, or you're doing it on site with your own backups, with your own backup solution, so you know that you can restore a system and get your data back easily and quickly if it goes wrong. The other thing to be aware of, it's not a backup unless you can restore from it. Practice. The number of times I've heard stories of people been backing up the data for years and in fact nothing was ever saved, and when it came to restore, either they couldn't do it or the data was never there. So make sure that your backups are working and test those from time to time. But if you can do those 4 things, you're already going to be in a very, very good position.
That's great. What about for I as an individual who wants to get into cybersecurity or someone in the industry? Any like top 3, top 4 tips?
So if you want to get into the industry, the jobs are always going to go for the people who appear most credible to the hiring managers. In the same way, if you really want to think about cybersecurity, think about things from a bad guy's point of view. Think, what is it they're trying to achieve? How are they going to go about it? And consider your protection from that point of view. Same thing goes for hiring. Think about things from the hiring manager's point of view. What do they want to see? Certainly, it'll be a mixture of degrees and certificates. A degree isn't necessarily a prerequisite. They want to see some sort of paper qualifications that you know your stuff, and also stuff that you can do. It's a mixture of what you know, what you can do. So getting those degrees, getting the certificates, showing what you know, but also those projects that you've done in what you can do. That's where the open source stuff comes in. That's where you can volunteer your time, securing organizations, charities maybe, your university, your school. Get that experience that you know what it is that you can do. Then you can go to the hiring manager and say, look, I'm early career, I've done these certificates, this is what I know, these are the projects that I've done. Research the type of thing that hiring manager might be looking after and just present yourself as the perfect candidate. The other key thing, no hiring manager wants drama. Leave the drama at home. Show yourself, your perfect employee is one who's just going to get on with the job with a minimum amount of drama. If you can project yourself as being the person that knows how to do the job, has some experience in doing it, can get on with it, can learn, can gain instruction without causing a massive drama, you're going to be the perfect employee. Often, the barrier to entry for these jobs really isn't that high. You've just got to know how to jump it and how to project yourself appropriately.
So Martin, how can people reach you? Because you're on Twitter, right? Or X as it's called these days?
So I tend to be more active on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect with me. The only thing I will say, don't look like a bad guy. If you've only got like half a dozen connections and I'm number 7, yeah, maybe I'm going to think twice about that. Simply, also, if there's no context in why you might be wanting to connect with me, I might be a bit suspicious. But yeah, feel free. I write regularly and make videos as well of things that I think are important and things that I think people want to know. I do feel quite strongly it's time now to skill up the next generation and actually think about passing on the baton. I'm well aware there's a whole new generation out there with new ideas of how to do things, who are coming to this with fresh ideas. great, what can I do to help people get started and help bringing these ideas to fruition. So please find me on LinkedIn, reach out. There are only so many hours in the day. I might not be able to reply to your essay, but I do what I can.
I hope you enjoyed this interview. I really enjoyed talking to Martin Lee, and I specifically asked to talk to him again. He has a fantastic way of explaining the threat landscape, giving you the information that you need to counter the threats that are facing us in 2024. If you have any comments, please put them below. Let me know the types of people that you want me to interview. As always, let me know the stuff that you're interested in learning about. I am trying to get a whole range of people talking about different topics. Hopefully you enjoyed the interview. I'm David Bombal, and I wish you all the very best.